Hello, and welcome to part 4 of this series where I talk about movies that every photographer should watch. This go around, we've got some absolute bangers and some criminally underseen gems. But before we get to them, I just have a message. In this series, I don't choose films solely because they feature photographers or cameras within them. Instead, these are films that resonate deeply with the artist's journey and the human experience, stories that transcend any single medium or profession. As photographers, our craft is rooted in observation, empathy, and storytelling. But being a great photographer should come second to being a great person. And these films, in my opinion, offer lessons that go beyond technique or aesthetics, inviting us to reflect on our values, our connections, and our purpose. By internalizing their messages, we not only grow as artists, but as individuals, capable of creating work that matters. All of that being said, yes, these are films that often feature photographer protagonists within them. I'm opting to use their profession, their hobby, whatever, as a jumping off point to hopefully make a connection that these films are important on a human level and subsequently on a photography level. I just saw a few comments in the previous videos in this series saying things like, this movie has nothing to do with photography. And sure, that might be the case, but it has everything to do with being human. And with that out of the way, let's talk about our first movie. Up first, I want to highlight a film from 2024 starring Kate Winslet that didn't get enough love, probably due to its limited theatrical release. Lee is a compelling drama that delves into the extraordinary life of Lee Miller, a former New York model turned trailblazing war photographer. The film follows her journey from a bohemian existence in 1930s Europe to the front lines of World War II, where she captures the profound human cost of conflict for Vogue magazine. Through her lens, Lee documents pivotal moments, including the Blitz in London, the liberation of Paris, and the atrocities uncovered at concentration camps, while also confronting the barriers imposed on women in war reporting. Told in reflective flashbacks as Lee recounts her story to an interviewer, the film explores her artistic passion, personal relationships, and the enduring impact of her wartime experiences on her family and herself. It's a powerful tribute to a woman who risked everything to reveal the truth through her photographs. Longtime viewers of the channel might actually recall a time where there was a video on here about Lee Miller. I made an entire artist spotlight episode where I talk about her life, and well, I got hit with a copyright strike on that video for some reason, even though I believed it fell under fair use for educational purposes. I ended up taking the video down as a small channel and creator. It didn't seem worth the risk of losing the channel on something like that. And yeah, I'm bitter about it, but that bitterness never extended to my admiration of Lee Miller and her work. So here I am yet again trying to preach the gospel of Lee Miller. The movie Lee has moments where it truly comes alive, particularly in the latter half as it focuses on Lee's time as a war correspondent. The film really begins to shift its gears when Miller begins documenting the unimaginable horrors of World War II from concentration camps to war-ravaged cities. Kate Winslet delivers a strong performance, especially as the emotional toll of her experiences start to show. There's a rawness in her portrayal. She captures Lee as someone unraveling, not in an overly dramatic way, but with subtlety and weight. The film even garnered her a Golden Globe nomination, which I think she deserved. The sequences leading up to Lee Miller's famous photograph in Hitler's bathtub stand out as some of the most memorable, though the journey to get there can feel uneven at times, especially in the first 30-ish minutes or so. What makes the movie Lee stand out is its focus on how Lee Miller's story almost got lost to time. Her work was groundbreaking, capturing unfiltered glimpses of war that most people at home never saw. But what's even more fascinating is how much of her story we almost didn't know. It wasn't until her son found her photographs in an attic after she had kept her war experiences mostly a secret that the world began to understand just how important her work was. That to me is such a powerful testament to the idea that history isn't always written in textbooks. Sometimes it's hiding in someone's attic, waiting to be rediscovered. Seriously, go check out Lee if you haven't already. It's a harrowing and beautiful film about Lee Miller, and it's carried by some tour de force performances, especially by Kate Winslet, Andy Samberg in a dramatic turn, and Marion Cotillard. You could also head over to my second channel that I have now, where I talk about movies, and watch my full thoughts on that movie in general. There's a whole long video about it. I'll leave the link in the description. Up next, I want to talk about an under-discussed Academy Award winner from 1984. In 1973, New York Times reporter Sidney Schomburg is sent to Cambodia, where Dith Pran, a local Cambodian journalist, is set up as his interpreter and guide. Over the next few years, the men and their families become friends. When US forces pull out of Cambodia, Schomburg is able to get exit visas for Pran's family. Soon, the Khmer Rouge take control, and Schomburg and other Western journalists are evacuated. As an American, Schomburg won't have any trouble leaving the country, but the situation is different for Pran. Once in New York, Schomburg and his colleagues attempt to evacuate Dith Pran, as his life is in even more danger from the Khmer Rouge, and so begins Schomburg's 4.5-year campaign to get Pran out of the country. So this film hit me way harder than I was actually expecting. Just a harrowing and deeply disturbing film about the cruelty that humans are capable of enacting onto their fellow man. There is some really, really effective and hard to watch imagery in this, and at times it made me scratch my head and say, am I watching a documentary? Did they just start making a major motion picture in the middle of war-torn Cambodia? Beyond the immediacy of war photography, The Killing Fields reflects on the power of photography as a tool for preserving memory and history. The film also explores the personal risks that photographers take physically, emotionally, and ethically in pursuit of the truth. It calls on photographers to think critically about their work's impact, both on their subjects and on the world. And ultimately, the film is a profound meditation on the courage required to bear witness and the transformative potential of visual storytelling to reveal hidden truths and inspire change. There is a huge scale to this film that I wasn't expecting, and the division of the film into two halves, where we have Dith Pran and the American journalist, and Dith escaping the new regime after he's been taken captive, it really caught me by surprise. And I'll say it here, what a fucking gem Hong S. Noor is in this film, and thank God he won the Academy Award for his performance in this movie. Just a fearless, going there performance from a non-actor at the time. He really blew me away. Like, there's some Leonardo DiCaprio and The Revenant energy to his performance. The way he snakes his way through the gross water, the way he has to stumble his way across a dam of human remains. It's a really electrifying performance, and one that I rarely hear people talk about in the modern age. I have a cat joining me now to talk about The Killing Fields. I think she was sitting on my lap when I watched it, and from memory, Kirby also enjoyed this movie. The rest of the cast of this movie is wonderful too. The scene where John Malkovich is trying to develop a photograph to basically fake Dith Pran's fake passport was so heart-pounding and crushing in the end. It was also a scene that's a delight for photographers out there, especially those who do their own darkroom printing and developing, because in the scene, they need to find the film, they need to find the chemicals, they need to develop a photograph in this dingy bathroom under the least ideal conditions imaginable. And what follows is a pretty tough revelation. I'm not surprised that this film was nominated for so many awards when it came out, and I really do highly recommend people go watch this, because I feel like it's a movie that's mostly forgotten to time, and I don't think it should be. So yeah, go check out The Killing Fields. Up next is a hidden gem from the Hitchcock of France, Henri-Georges Clouzot. La Prisonnière, or Women in Chains, directed by Henri-Georges Clouzot, is a psychological drama that delves into themes of desire, betrayal, and obsession. The story revolves around José, a television editor living in the suburbs with her boyfriend Gilbert, an avant-garde artist. Their lives take a turn when José is drawn into the world of Stanislas, a wealthy and enigmatic art gallery owner. Stanislas introduces José to the provocative form of art, bondage photography. Initially repelled, José becomes increasingly fascinated by the allure of his photographs and the charged atmosphere of his studio. This fascination develops into a complex relationship as she begins modeling for him, navigating her growing feelings of excitement, confusion, and longing. However, Stanislas remains distant, leaving José yearning for a deeper connection. This film explores the complexities of human desire, the interplay of power in relationships, and the lengths people go to pursue their passions, even at great personal cost. This film, much like The Killing Fields, had a hold on me that I was not anticipating. And I really have to commend this film for having such a wise way of sucking you in and building tension in what otherwise could have been tensionless sequences in the hands of any other filmmaker. The scene of the first photo shoot when Jose sits in to watch Stanislav take photos of another model was some truly masterful work at building a scene until you feel yourself about to burst. Not like that. There's a scene that follows soon after in which Stan is instructing Jose to pretend to order around some invisible, submissive model, and it was equally compelling, and my eyes were just glued to every second of it. I saw this for the first time a few months ago, and I'm still in shock with how many images and sequences from this film flash in my mind. The camera work and the cinematography seem to be wildly inventive and modern even for the era that this film was made. The use of Bauhaus color schemes and kaleidoscopic imagery mixed with taut and energetic blocking of the actors really felt like something that ought to be studied in film schools if it isn't already. I had one of those why aren't more people talking about this kind of moments in the middle while watching it. And just briefly, I want to mention that Henri-Georges Clouzot has been a bit of an obsession of mine since watching this movie. It was my first time watching any of his films, and then immediately after this I watched his film Wages of Fear, which I can give all the same praise to that one in terms of camera work, cinematography, and just feeling way more modern. And La Prisonnière came out over 10 years after The Wages of Fear. The Wages of Fear, I think, was made in 1953, if you could believe it. If you watch that movie, you might not even believe it was made that long ago. And then after that, I watched his film Diabolique, which is a real sort of Hitchcockian thriller that he made right after Wages of Fear. Really, really, truly fascinating stuff. If you're interested in like cinema history and maybe French cinema, definitely check out some of Henri-Georges Clouzot's work. But anyway, back to Women in Chains. To say the least, this film jumped out of the screen at me and had me inspired, invigorated, and contemplative on the nature of sensual media, the nature of love and sex, and the philosophical lines between dirty and clean. Films like Women in Chains and other films in this lineage often use photography as a metaphor for power, perspective, and the act of being seen in both literal and emotional terms. Because photography inherently involves a power dynamic. The photographer controls the framing, the lighting, and the narrative of an image. And in films like this, male photographers often represent some sort of authority, shaping not only the visual depiction of their female subjects, but also, in some ways, their identity. And this dynamic raises questions about consent, agency, and boundaries. What happens when a photographer's quote-unquote vision oversteps into manipulation and dominance? The act of photographing can become an extension of their desire, but it also risks objectifying the subject rather than revealing their true self. At the same time, these films and stories like this often suggest that being photographed can be transformative. For women, like Jose, in the case of this movie, it can be an opportunity to explore their own sensuality or confront internalized judgments about their desires and perhaps reclaim aspects of their identity that feel suppressed. When done ethically, photography has the power to make someone feel seen in a way that transcends the physical image. A recent film that I think people out there might be aware of is the movie Baby Girl with Nicole Kidman. I would not be surprised if Helena Rain, the writer-director of Baby Girl, had watched Woman in Chains before making that film because thematically they seem to have a lot in common. And these are some pretty interesting themes that are going on for a movie that came out in 1968. For anyone out there that has prejudices against watching films prior to the 1980s, there's some incredible stuff out there waiting for you. So yeah, go check out Woman in Chains or La Prisonnière. I highly recommend it. I'm sure there are more elegant critiques and praises of this film, but it's the kind of thing that if I had seen it when I was 18, it might have become my entire life. Up next, an absolute gut punch of a documentary. All the Beauty and the Bloodshed is a 2022 American biographical documentary about photographer, artist, and activist Nan Goldin. The film tackles Goldin's life through her advocacy during the HIV/AIDS crisis in the 80s and her fight against the Sackler family for their role in the current opioid epidemic in the United States. At the 95th Academy Awards, the film was nominated for Best Documentary Feature. The film went on to win a Peabody Award at the 84th ceremony for capturing the zeal of an artist eager to use her work to create a new vision for and of the world. Golden, a well-known photographer whose work often documented the LGBT subcultures and the HIV/AIDS crisis, founded the advocacy group PAIN, or PAIN, Prescription Addiction Intervention Now, in 2017, after her addiction to OxyContin and near-fatal overdose of fentanyl. PAIN specifically targets museums and other arts institutions to hold the art community accountable for its collaboration with the Sackler family and its well-publicized financial support of the arts. Man, I was not prepared for this movie. I went in as a general fan of Nan Goldin as a significant figure in the history of late 20th century New York photography and art, but I really had no idea this film was going to be so multifaceted and focused on the pursuit of pain to hold the Sackler family accountable for the hundreds of thousands of deaths at the hands of opioids. And I'll be real with you, I found myself choking up at several moments in this film just by the sheer sadness of the reality of the crisis, but also during moments of triumph. Like when the organization has a win, it feels like a win for humanity. And as a member of said humanity, I am eternally grateful for their efforts. The filmmaking aspect of documentaries has always fascinated me, and the structure of this film, the way that it maneuvers through various subjects such as Nan's sister, Nan's rise to fame, the AIDS crisis, and the PAIN initiative against the Sacklers, was honestly impeccably done. When the true gravity of the film's message is on full display, which is pretty early on, I was locked in and invested every step of the way. And just to reiterate what I said at the beginning of this video, I know that these videos are titled Movies Made for Photographers or Movies That Every Photographer Should Watch. But honestly, this is a movie for anyone who has a beating heart and people in their lives that they care about, which I certainly hope is everyone out there watching this video. I can't believe I waited so long to watch this one. Don't be like me. Up next, a movie that recently made it into my top 5 favorite movies of all time, directed by none other than Bob Fosse. All That Jazz, directed by Bob Fosse, is a dazzling and deeply personal exploration of art, obsession, and mortality. The film follows Joe Gideon, a brilliant but self-destructive theater director and choreographer, as he juggles the chaotic demands of his career, the complicated relationships with the women in his life, and his mounting health issues. Through a mix of gritty realism and surreal hallucinatory musical sequences, the film delves into Joe's psyche, capturing the highs of his creative genius and the lows of his self-destructive tendencies. As Joe faces his own mortality, he stages elaborate fantasies, blurring the line between life and performance in a spectacle that's equal parts joyous, heartbreaking, and profoundly human. This is not just a film about show business, it's an unflinching portrait of a man grappling with his legacy, his flaws, and the ultimate curtain call. If you love bold, boundary-pushing storytelling with stunning musical numbers and raw emotional depth, All That Jazz is an unforgettable experience. So Bob Fosse, if you didn't know, is a choreographer turned director whose career was defined by his unmatched creative vision, and he crafted All That Jazz as a semi-autobiographical reflection of his own life. Known for his groundbreaking choreography and unrelenting pursuit of perfection, Bob Fosse revolutionized stage and screen with works like Cabaret and Lenny, movies that I'm sure I'll talk about at some point in the future. By the time he had made All That Jazz, he had endured a heart attack, tumultuous relationships, and physical and emotional toll of being an obsessive workaholic. And this film became his cinematic confessional, a fantasy about his own demise. It's truly impossible to watch All That Jazz without recognizing how deeply personal it is. Joe Gideon is Bob Fosse's alter ego, a man whose brilliance and ambition are inseparable from his vices and self-destruction. The film's layers of surrealism and introspection allow Bob Fosse to grapple with his own mortality, his flaws, and the people that he hurt along the way. Having just discovered this film recently, I'm absolutely floored by it. Some context, Lenny, also directed by Bob Fosse, is one of my favorite films of all time. Somehow, I went the last 10 years of my life without seeing another Bob Fosse film until I stumbled on All That Jazz in a thrift store. And what a revelation it turned out to be. The performances, the music, the cinematography, the editing. My God, the editing. Some of the best editing I've ever seen in any movie ever, and it's from a movie in 1979. The kinetic energy, the precision, the way the scenes flow seamlessly into one another, it's impossible to deny the film's impact on future generations of filmmakers. When the film goes full Fellini with the hospital hallucinations toward the end, I was leaning into my TV, wanting to jump in and be a part of it. There's so much creativity, like moments where Joe is directing a musical number while lying in a hospital bed. It's really just staggering stuff. And also, this isn't in my script, but I gotta give a shout out to Roy Scheider's performance as Joe Gideon. Truly top notch. If you only know Roy Scheider as the guy from Jaws, you got to check out more of his work because he's an incredible actor. I also recommend Sorcerer, which is a remake of Wages of Fear, which was directed by Henri-Georges Clouzot. Sorry, I'm going down a giant rabbit hole. It's hard not to admire Bob Fosse's bravery in creating a film that bears his soul, warts and all, for the world to see. This is a man confronting his mortality, his mistakes, and his legacy, and doing so with a level of artistry that few could match. And I just gotta say bravo. Bob Fosse was a true visionary, and it's a shame that his name isn't mentioned more when we're discussing the greatest filmmakers of all time. With Lenny and all that jazz, I believe he's made 2 perfect films, and Cabaret is not far behind. I think it's near perfect. While this particular film celebrates artistic passion, it also serves as a cautionary tale to what happens when ambition overtakes self-care. For any artists that are prone to burnout or overworking, all that jazz is a powerful reminder to prioritize health and relationships alongside their craft. Watching All That Jazz isn't just experiencing a great film, it's an invitation to reflect on what it means to be an artist, to create authentically, and to grapple with the inevitability of one's own limits. It's truly a must-see for anyone who strives to make art that matters. And there you have it. That's part 4 and 5 more movies for you to check out. Thank you all so much for leaving comments of movies that I should cover in the future. I promise that I will get to them. Just be patient with me. Don't forget to do all the normal stuff. Subscribe and hit the bell to be notified when new videos come out on the channel. You can support me by becoming a member. You could also support me by checking out my print shop. You can also support me by going and checking out my other YouTube channel. I have a whole separate YouTube channel called Cinema Wellness. And on that channel, I talk all about movies. So if you like what I'm doing in these videos, you're definitely going to love that channel. And you could also check out my podcast that is linked to that channel. And you could also maybe check out this novella that I wrote. Okay, I think that's all the things I have to plug. I'll see you all next time.